We're headed down Roosevelt Channel. This little channel is tucked behind Buck Key to the east and Captiva off to the west of it. It's a great little nestled-in place. It's full of seagrass beds and mangroves. All but 10 acres of it is in conservation hands. It's a place that, in of itself, it has an incredible history. There's a family by the name of Futch that farmed the south end of it. He married a Cherokee bride, and so it's said that Teddy Roosevelt actually arrived here on a barge. Now, people say that he came down here to hunt manta rays because they were looking for alternatives to cow's leather. He did a lot of research while he was down here as well. This is well after he's the president. But while he was president, we owe him a great deal of thanks because he is the first person to take conservation steps in this area. In 1908, he declared some of the islands out here in Pine Island Sound as bird reservations. And there were several islands out here in Pine Island Sound that they knew had rookeries on them, and President Roosevelt set those aside. So actually the Pine Island Sound National Wildlife Refuge predates the Ding Darling National Wildlife Refuge. When Darling passed away in 1962, there was a small group here made up of Captivans and Sanibel folks, and they called themselves the Ding Darling Memorial Committee. Once the refuge was dedicated in August of '67, within about 4 months, the Sanibel Captiva Conservation Foundation was born. And it basically was that same group of people under a new name. And that was October 31st of 1967 when they were founded. And there has been incredible support. I mean, there's a lower number of people living on Captiva and certainly a fewer number of businesses, but pound for pound, percentage-wise, we have more supporters on Captiva than we do on Sanibel. There are some Calusa mounds on Buck Key. I know that I was out there one day setting a boundary sign for the Fish and Wildlife Service, and we just needed to dig in the sand a little bit to put the post in, and I found a tooth. I mean, a tooth indicates to me that it was probably a burial mound at one point in time. But I mean, think about how rich the natural resources here, and having civilizations lasting thousands of years just on the bounty of Pine Island Sound, and having such an easy life in some ways, although I take the exception to mosquitoes and no-see-ums, but enough time, enough free time to develop their art and their music and their dance far beyond any other Native American culture we know of. This is the Ding Darling Fish House. This is a house he built basically in secret. Penny didn't know about it. According to Sarita Van Vleck, he said that he had an anniversary present for her, and she got dressed to the nines, thought she was coming out to someplace really special, and he pointed to it. He said, "Happy anniversary, dear," and she never went inside. He said, "Absolutely not." He had a cottage at Tweenwaters, which is what she was accustomed to. So they never stayed there. He used it as a studio, but that did not become their winter home. It's a really durable house and so iconic for Captiva. So you're looking at Redfish Pass. It was actually created in about 3 storms. I always kind of think of this as sort of a narrow place anyway, probably like Charlie's Pass is now up on North Captiva. They say it was the home of the Mickle family. Their farm was in this particular area in the early 1920s. We had a tropical storm in 1921 that came through and started blowing the sand out. And then in 23, we got another tropical storm, then a hurricane in 1926 that made landfall in Sarasota. The backside of those winds gouged this hole out. You've got that sort of dirty bathtub ring of discoloration on the rocks over there. Well, that tells you what the tide's been doing. This is a great place to fish. Real deep channel, right next to the rocks. Again, fish kind of funnel in this spot. Now, where the boat is now was land. This is where I used to camp, right about here. There were Australian pines, just layers and layers and layers of them. Every year the bald eagle would have to build their nest in a tree further and further landward because they'd lose the tree. But you couldn't see these houses. Yeah, these were all bayside houses, basically. So as you look back, keep in mind that that past wasn't there. When Theodore Roosevelt was down here, and when the Dickies were first down here, this was all Captiva Island, because that was prior to the 1920s. So when they talk about playing on the beach of Captiva, it could have been here. The area that's treeless is what we call Charlie's Pass, and that was free running water right after Hurricane Charlie. It took about a year and a half for it to close up, but to me, when I envision what Redfish Pass must have looked like at some point in time, it probably looked like this. I loved that. For a couple of years after, that was all white sand. You know, you could see your feet and see the starfish and see the crabs skittling. Captivans were as involved in preservation of the Sanibel Refuge and actually preservation of Buck Key as anyone. And we owe a great deal to what this area looks and feels like to Captivans that were here in the 30s, the 40s, and the 50s. That's why we're the Sanibel Captiva Conservation Foundation. Lest we forget, there are 2 islands that work very hard for conservation.